if you are holding on to your identity in any way, that's a threat to them. That's a threat to their end goal, which is to isolate you and just make you question yourself and doubt yourself.
Welcome, everybody, to the Not For Nothing podcast, hosted by the dynamic duo Christopher Michael and Ashley Mayland, where they delve into life, love, relationships, and personal growth. Be sure to tune in every week for a refreshing take on life's most important lessons. All right, so we're back, joined with Grace Stuart today. Grace, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you are actually originally from Philly.
Yes.
And you now are native to Florida.
Yeah.
What brought about that move?
So my family moved down here and I'm close with my family. So I decided to come down last winter and, find a place and just, experience different weather. I had nothing holding me back up there. So I thought, let's try something new. It's been super nice. It's it's a good, fresh start.
Yeah. Good for you.
That's awesome. So are you enjoying it though so far up to this point?
I am. I'm starting to get used to it. Like I miss up north at times, just seasons, little things that you don't realize. But every time I go back, I'm like, yeah, this is the
new
spot.
I thought, give it 18 months, all those little things will fall right off for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you start to remember what the great weather is like during the winter, you'll be happy.
Where are you from originally?
Palm trees and sun, New York.
Oh, right. Okay.
So actually, I grew up in the Bronx and then I moved to Westchester County for high school. So that was my, but this is the best move by far I've ever made.
Awesome.
Even though I love New York, it's where my heart's at. I'll never move back.
Yeah.
Ever.
That would be hard.
No.
I don't know how people live there.
It's not, especially now. It's taken such a dramatic turn over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Politically, everything. I could never even stand it. I can barely stand it for a week at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
But so originally you met through Ashley.
Yeah. So I found Grace on TikTok, my favorite app. And I came across one of her videos. I think it was one of your first videos. I think you had just started making videos. I think it's
okay.
So, but what I really resonated with was that she's an advocate for domestic abuse survivors. And that's something very close and near to my heart as well. And her posts were just so relatable. Like every little thing that she posted, I was like, oh my God. Yes. Oh my God, I went through that too. Like that, I understand that. And it's like, even she even goes into detail about little tiny things that happen in the beginning of an abusive relationship that women that have never been in one wouldn't even know and wouldn't even know to look for, which I love about her platform. That's what I love her platform for, is for like opening your eyes to the things that you have to pay attention to, before getting in a relationship or while you're in one, and get out before it's too late.
Absolutely. And that's why I created my platform from the start, was to really speak to the person going through it who's like, what am I dealing with here?
Yeah.
Why do I feel almost addicted to the situation? Not that person wants to be mistreated,
right?
But you get in the cycle of abuse and it is so powerful.
Yeah.
People don't realize how strong it is and what it's even really about.
Yeah.
So I created my platform for the person who is like, why do I almost feel like toxically loyal to this person?
Yeah.
Or I feel responsible for them.
Yeah.
Like I hear that a lot too. All these weird things that you don't realize. That's what I try to talk about. So.
Yeah. And it's so important because people from the outside looking in, they think it's so simple. They think it's so black and white. They look at a situation and go, well, he's abusive, leave. It's a simple thing to do. Just get out. Like, why are you still there? Like if he's hitting you, if he's hurting you, if he's assaulting you, if he's, manipulating you, like, why are you still there? Just get out. It's so easy. Like they have no idea when you haven't been in that toxicity, when you haven't been in that environment, when you haven't fallen in love with someone who had a mask on until you fell in love with them, you don't get it.
Absolutely. And that's also why I started my podcast, was to answer the question, why doesn't she just leave?
Yeah.
Or men deal with it too, but to answer that question, why doesn't she just leave?
Yeah. Is that what your podcast is called?
It's called Why She Stayed.
Oh, okay.
So
I love that.
we're speaking on why we say, what is the abuser doing that causes us to stay?
Yeah.
So, I think it's helping, and that's all I can do.
Did you have while you were in the middle of that kind of crisis situation, did you have those thoughts like to yourself at that moment? Why am I so loyal to this person? Or did that happen after you kind of got away from it?
So it was both. Of course, in the beginning, it's not that way. But as time progressed, I I would defend him to no end. I lost many things in my life. I even lost a job at one point because, you know, there was a situation where I went on a trip with him and I kind of got manipulated into something, and like you lose things in the cycle. So when you're in it, you do start to realize, why am I so toxically loyal to them?
Right.
Why am I defending someone who's hurting me?
Yeah. You were how old when you met him?
Barely 20. Yeah. About 20.
And he was 14 years older than you?
Yes.
And that is a huge, huge thing to bring light to, because a lot of abusive men, or abusive people, I should say, in general, they go for someone younger, more naive, because they know that they can have more control. It's easier to manipulate someone that is still really young and hasn't experienced a lot of life yet.
Yeah.
And you were just that. Like, you were almost 20 years old. Like, you, at that point, you really haven't even had many significant relationships, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, at the very start, there was this atmosphere where he was very charming, very likable. He could really like command a room. He was just like that person. And he got a lot of women, like that whole atmosphere where there's like this competition going on almost. Yeah. And when you're very young, you get caught up in that kind of noise where, you know, you just get caught up in it.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened very early on. And it just goes from there.
Yeah.
You know, I think, that's how when you're in that age range, especially, you're vulnerable.
Yeah. Can you talk about how you met him and how it progressed for you?
Yeah. So we met at a public place relating to his job at the time, and he handed me his number. You know, typical situation. I knew it wasn't the right situation at first, but you know, things happen. They just catch you at the right time. They catch you at a time in your life when you're kind of not expecting it. And so eventually I thought, okay, maybe, you know, we'll just spend time together once. And I always say, like, it only takes one time to get trauma bonded to someone, whatever happens, you know, in that situation. But it only really takes one interaction to possibly get trauma bonded to them.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the catalyst for everything, was just that one time of seeing, you know, I know this isn't right for me, but let me see where this could go.
Wow.
It just opened up a whole door.
With your relationship though, was it right after, like once you became officially together, or was it kind of a natural progression into that state
of abuse?
Yeah. So a lot of times abusers, they almost go from a place of being indifferent towards you to then possession. Sometimes there's this in-between time where things are good and things are comfortable. Right. But for me, it went from kind of him being initially pursuing, but then becoming sort of indifferent, creating that push-pull.
Yep.
And then they eventually start with that possession.
Yep.
And a lot of times in the beginning, it starts with just subtle disrespect, little hints of jealousy, just little trespasses of your boundaries that are so small you can't realize it. So I think it started slow. You know, you don't realize what's happening.
You knew it felt wrong. You just didn't even know that it was abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you don't correlate the word abuse to your situation for a long time.
No, you don't.
It takes a really long time. So
yeah, I agree with that 100%.
For you, what was your kind of, that's it, I've had it, enough moment?
It took about 4 years. I eventually got married to him at one point. We were only married for a year, but he eventually got arrested for domestic violence. And that was the final time he became physical. And I left at that point, but I almost went back again after that. And that's what happens. It takes an average of 7 times to leave an abuser.
Wow.
And there's a reason for that.
Wow.
It's because it's similar to an addiction in a way.
Yeah.
And not everybody feels that way anymore. Like sometimes people stay because financial position, sometimes they're ready to leave, but
they can't.
They feel they can't. In my case, it was very much that addictive cycle where it's called intermittent reinforcement or intermittent abuse. So they're not bad to you all the time.
Right.
Sometimes they're amazing and they take you on that really high and then they bring you low. Yeah. So once that happens even once, now you're in it. Now you just want to do whatever you can to stay on good terms with them and to stay in control and just to get back to that high.
That's right.
Well, they do it to keep you trapped, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, you can only make something so unbearably miserable for somebody before they just say like, that's it, I've had it. So you have to kind of, I would imagine they're very calculated in what they do. Because,
it's like a roller coaster.
Yeah, sure. Because they give you a glimpse of hope, right? Like that they're going to come back to who they were.
Yeah.
And then they rip it from you.
And what happens too, and I know Grace can attest to this, they'll start showing the signs of aggression or they'll start showing the signs of abuse. And just when you're starting to like realize it in your head, all of a sudden they switch back to the person that you originally fell in love with, right? And you're like, oh, you know what? I'm looking at them wrong. I'm looking at the situation wrong. Like I was overthinking that. And then they'll confirm if you bring it up. Like if you're even questioning it and you talk about it out loud, they'll confirm with you. You're overthinking it. Yeah. You're too sensitive. That is not what that was. That didn't happen. Yes. Like, so you start questioning your own reality. You're seeing things. You know they're wrong. Your instincts are like screaming out, this is not right. And then they do something great again. And then you start questioning everything that you saw and felt.
Well, I would imagine you start to feel like you're crazy to a degree.
You do.
When they do things like that.
You do.
You know?
And even a lot of women deal with this. I dealt with this. You start to feel like you might be the abuser because you're going through that cycle with them. And you're like, wait, have I seen any of this correctly? And a lot of times they will bring you so low so many times that you just feel crushed. You feel crushed and you start to react in ways that kind of mimic their behaviors. Like you might be yelling back. You might be hitting back or whatever, whether it's self-defense or you just reach that breaking point and then you think, am I the abuser?
Yeah,
like,
you do.
You start to mimic them a little bit.
You think it's you.
Yeah.
And not only do you think it's you, but like they do things. Well, so they do things that push you, right? And then they'll say things like, oh, I only did that because of the way that you act. I would never have done that if you hadn't done this. And so you start justifying their abuse because you start thinking, oh, well, if I hadn't done that, this would have never happened. It's because of me that he acts this way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say, like, abusers do apologize. Like, we miss that.
Sometimes.
A lot of times we hear they'll never have empathy. They'll never do this. Well, they probably don't have empathy.
Yeah.
But the cycle of abuse brings you to a point where there's that apology phase where they're like, give me another chance. Whether they're just demanding another chance, you're going to hit that spot in the cycle where it's kind of like you feel like you owe it to them to give them another chance. And so the apologies, of course, are fake. Yeah. But they bring you back to that spot.
Well, and they feel good, right?
Yeah.
Because you love them. Like you are so deeply embedded in this trauma bond. Yeah. You want to stay. You want to find every reason to stay because there's no feeling like the feeling of being with them in a good moment, right?
Exactly.
And so even when you know and deep down, you know, this apology probably isn't real. This is going to go back to exactly where it was. You will almost sacrifice all of that just for that moment of feeling like they love you again.
Absolutely.
So just you would both know better than me, but is it once an abuser, always an abuser, or there are people that go to low places and low moments in their life and it happens like one off? Are there guys out there that where it is just happens to be a very low moment in their life, or is it just innate in them?
So I think the important thing to know is that abuse is about power and control. It's about a power dynamic in the relationship that's imbalanced. That's really what it is. So of course, you know, there can be mistreatment in relationships. My ex struggled with addiction pretty severely, very severely. And so that was an element to the relationship. But just because there's issues going on, such as that example, that doesn't necessarily mean that person's an abuser. Right. An abuser is someone who they are trying to maintain power and control in the relationship. So I believe it's very much at the core of who they are. Yeah. And a lot of times that's what they're unwilling to let go of is the power and control. I agree. So the first step in changing would be admitting that the issue is not that they just lost control or that, you know, they had a bad day at work or, you know, they're pointing in all these other directions and they want you looking in all these directions. The first step would be admitting that they want to maintain control. And that's usually what they're unwilling to do, I think, to start to change. So
it's a lack of self-reflection. I've noticed a lot of abusers, they can't self-reflect, or even if they could, they don't want to. They don't want to, right?
I would imagine it's near impossible to look at yourself in the mirror if you did self-reflect.
Yeah.
And you realized what a complete scumbag you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is coming from a guy, because I can't relate to guys like that, obviously. You're now, Ashley, someone else we had on you, like the third person. I got to say, again, it enrages me. Because guys like that are just, I could do away with every one of them. That's personally. Right. I mean, it's just outrageous to me.
So you were married.
We were, yes, for a year. And, I think that's when things really started to become like darker for me, but it was years and years of it. And I do want to say there's a type of abuser who's almost calm, cool, calculated. We were talking about this. They don't have to be a screamer. Yeah. They don't have to be,
punching the walls.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a type that's calm, cool, collected, and calculated.
Yep.
And that's sometimes the most painful type, because all the more you're feeling like, what am I dealing with? Like, you feel all the more crazy.
You do.
So, like I always tell women, they don't have to be screaming right directly in your face. They could be manipulating you the whole conversation, and you are just in that space where all you know is you can't do anything right. Yeah. Or at least you can't do anything right for very long.
Yeah.
But they make you think that you hold the power in a way. Yeah. They make you think that you have the power. If you would just do this or that, we could get the relationship back on track.
Yeah.
So it's painful to think, do I have the power to change this? You think they're always right on the bend of going into a good phase and changing for good. Mm-hmm. They want you to think they're always just about to change for good. So it's very difficult.
And that it's always you. You're always the problem, and you're the reason why there is no peace in the relationship. You're the reason why they act the way they do. You're the reason why the relationship is failing.
Yes.
Even though they're the perpetrator.
Exactly.
And when you're young and you're naive, you believe it. And actually, sometimes when you're older, you believe it. In fact, I have been in more than one abusive relationship, because it is a pattern of allowing behaviors that are unacceptable and not recognizing what they actually are, because you believe that you are the problem. You believe, it's my trauma. And because I'm so insecure, I led him to react that way, because I didn't trust him when I should have trusted him. It's so many little tiny things that people don't realize. And when you believe you're the problem, you allow bad behavior. You allow people to mistreat you. And until you break that pattern and realize that, wait a minute, no, this is not me. This is me allowing people in my life that know how to take advantage of me, right? Until you get to that point, you will continue to be in a cycle of abusive relationships.
Well, I think, for me, what I'd want to know, and I think, I would think what I want to know is, are there things that you now, after having experienced it and been through it, that you look out for in particular that would keep you out of a situation like that again? Or do you think some guys are just so good at the manipulation that even after you could find yourself back in a situation like that, potentially?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think one of the things is, of course, the love bombing. You want to feel all those good things. You want someone to be pursuing you, and like, it feels good. Yeah. But I think, one thing, I think a lot of times we don't want a bad guy. Right. We don't want someone who's bad.
That's right.
But we almost mistaken it for kind of like a masculine energy, because they're pursuing us. We think, this feels good. Like, they're very masculine. Yeah. But really, if he was truly that, he would be comfortable in himself to be able to love you, not from an insecure point of view where he wants to be worshipped. Yeah. That abusers want to be worshipped.
They do.
In a way.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we don't realize that. So there's little things in the beginning, like love bombing almost. And with love bombing, it's okay for someone to be pursuing you and treating you well. But I think the difference is like, does it seem like they've already made up their mind about you before they've even gotten to know you too? Like, you want him to be, or the female, you want to be getting to know each other equally. Yeah. If they're just all of a sudden like, let's go, what are we doing? Like, very strong, that's one sign.
That's a sign. Okay.
Yeah. And I do want to say, with love bombing doesn't mean they're an abuser. Right. There are some people that are like love addicts, right? They just love and they are ready to go at all times in every relationship. They just fall hard. They fall fast. And those are for different reasons. Right. But it is still something to consider. It is still something to look out for, because even if they're not an abuser, even if they're a great person, ultimately, there is something that you have to consider, like when a person just dives right in without knowing you.
Right.
That is a red flag.
It's reckless.
Yeah. And it doesn't,
to say the least.
Yeah, it's reckless and it is a red flag. And I've been guilty of it myself, right? Like I have been willing to just 2 weeks in being like, you're the love of my life. I'm ready. Where's the ring? Like, not literally, but I'm just saying like it happens, right?
It feels good. It's a high, I mean, who doesn't like to be loved? I mean, seriously, who doesn't want companionship? I mean, like we've talked, unless you're just a sociopath or a narcissist of some kind, who doesn't want to have real connection with somebody?
That's right. Yeah.
So it's tough when somebody comes at you like that to not, especially if you find them attractive or somewhat interesting. Of course, you're going to let your guard down.
Yeah.
I mean, at least to see what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And if someone's really good at the manipulation, they're going to be able to take it further with you.
That's right.
I truly believe from the stories that I hear that they're very calculated.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely. And I would almost imagine to a degree have it perfected in their minds how they're going to go about it, which is even more disgusting to say the least, that it is so premeditated. Like truly it is.
There were many premeditated things in my story, but one of the other things at the very start was this pattern of subtle disrespect. And it sounds weird, but this is something I talk about on my page. They will do things, many of them will do things to you like just subtle crossing of your boundaries. They'll poke you, pinch you, bite you, slap you hard, like to where it's like out, to where you, and call it play, to where you react. And then they get mad at you for reacting. So they're training you to manage your reactions towards them or manage their reactions. And they're getting you used to physical things.
Yeah.
They're testing you to see what they can get away with. And it's not the victim's fault, but it is something that I noticed, the play fighting, where it's like, why do you have to jab me in my side
so hard that it's bruised?
Yeah.
And this is why I loved her page so much, was because she talked about these little tiny things like this that even I, after everything I've been through, have experienced and didn't even relate to abuse, didn't even know, didn't even see those as signs. But reading her page, she really picked up on these tiny details. And then I started seeing other people talking about it too, like the pinching. Like I had no idea, and that's happened to me, where it's like, why are you pinching me so much? Ow, like that hurts, you're leaving marks. And they think it's funny. And they're just like, I'm just playing with you. Like there's these little tiny things that I would have never considered until reading and seeing it on her page.
Yeah, well, think about it. I mean, it does. It makes sense. They boundary test you, right? And I would imagine they desensitize you too.
Yes.
Desensitize is the word.
That's
right.
What they do.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. So, and the more you desensitize somebody to anything, the more they get used to it, and then they can go a little further next time, right? Because they don't notice it. Then their threshold for it becomes greater and greater. So you can take it further and further. Right?
Yeah.
So when you think about what they do, it's an unfortunate premeditation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would imagine it's awful.
Another thing from my story is this theme of like being pressured. A lot of abusers they're just very pressuring. They require you to move at their pace to prove your loyalty to them. So things feel rushed all the time. Everything's rushed. And like, you almost have to, you'll find yourself betraying yourself in a way with things that maybe you wanted to see different things happen in a relationship. And now you're kind of accommodating to them.
Yep.
Because everything's rushed, pressure, like they know how to put on the pressure big time. So.
And the weird thing too about abusers, it's an immediate expectation of loyalty. Immediate. Now, they're not going to give you that same loyalty. They're going to hold you to standards that even when they do, because they'll still do it, if you confront them, it's like they're just baffled that you would expect them to do that, even though they hold you to it, right? Yes. Like you can't see other men or be friends with other men, but they have friends that are girls that they see all the time, and that's okay. And you're going to have to be able to accept that. That's just, someone in my life. That's just, they've been around for a long time. They were here before you were. But then you go to meet up with guy friends and it's absolutely unacceptable. Now you're going to get silent treatment for 8 hours, maybe till tomorrow, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing is abusers with the double standards. That's one of the things that a lot of times starts from the start is big double standards. Like they're monitoring you. All of a sudden you're the cheating girlfriend who can't be trusted. And of course you're not cheating on them.
Right.
But all of a sudden you're the one that needs to be monitored according to them. Yeah. But they're the one that is going out for 18 hours at a time, disappearing and coming home at 4 a.m. and demanding that you just put up with it.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll say things like, you're so selfish. You just need to be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you would just be less selfish or more grateful, then this would stop.
Yeah. If you would just trust me, I'm telling you that you can trust me.
Yeah.
And you're not. And that's on you.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they say.
I think selfish, I just hear them using that term all the time.
Yeah.
You're selfish.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they refuse to let you be your own person.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you are holding on to your identity in any way, that's a threat to them. That's a threat to their end goal, which is to isolate you and just make you question yourself and doubt yourself.
To make them feel powerful and
Yeah.
in control.
It's a deflection too, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like 100%.
It is.
Because they must have, I mean, I would imagine they're the most insecure kind of guy.
Oh, yeah. Ultimately.
You know, like 100%. But my question, like a real question for you is, were you secretive about it? Like, did people know? Did they have kind of like were they able to look into what was going on? Did you tell your mother, your friends that you know, or? At
first, I was extremely secretive to the point where I didn't tell anybody we were hanging out.
Right.
But as time went on, everybody found out, of course. And it, you know, you have to tell people eventually, like, I'm in a relationship.
Right, of course.
But as things got into being thicker into the abuse, I was toxically loyal. I defended him to no end. It didn't matter how low I went, I could go lower. And that's why I say it's similar to it's almost addictive. You're not addicted to being mistreated, but when you're in those highs and lows, you'll do anything to stay in good standing with them.
That's right.
And to protect the trauma bond.
Yeah. And protect them.
Yeah. So you become kind of dependent on the trauma bond, and I would be secretive in the way that I would hide the mistreatment that was going on.
Right. Like the abuse.
So, yeah, it didn't become physical till the very end. And there was a physical incident earlier in the relationship, but I would just hide anything to maintain control. So I was trying to maintain control over
the way people saw him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine. I got to be honest, because I again, keep in mind, I'm coming from a man's perspective who does not do things like that.
Yeah.
So like I have my close girlfriends, right? I have 3 of them that I grew up with. And if any one of them told me that, I don't even care if they defended him, I would kill them. They would never know I was going.
Yeah.
And I would kill the guy.
And here's the thing.
They can defend it all they want. It would never be okay.
The women know that. They know that if they told people the truth, that it would change the way those people saw them forever.
Right. That's what I wanted to.
And that's why a lot of women, I think, stay silent with close friends and families, because they don't want them to see them in a bad light, because then when it's good again, you still want those people to like them. Right.
Right.
So you're like, I got to protect the good part of him, because if they know about the bad part, they'll never accept the good part, but I still do. I still tolerate it, right?
Exactly.
It's a weird, twisted thing that doesn't make sense just on the surface. It doesn't.
Yeah. And you start to feel like you're betraying them if you tell anyone what's going on. That's part of the toxic loyalty thing. You feel like if you tell someone, you're betraying them.
That's right.
So that happened several times throughout our relationship where, you know, he also struggled with substance abuse, and he ended up dragging me into it several times. Not using together, but I was pulled into it through manipulation and stuff. And I felt like if I told anybody what happened, I would be betraying him, because he had just gotten back a lot of things in his life that were finally getting on track.
Yeah.
And then he slipped back. And since I was part of that several times, I felt like I'd be betraying him.
Yeah.
If I said what was going on, because they design it that way.
Yeah. And they pull you in on purpose with those things too, so that you feel guilty saying anything, because you're like, I was a part of it. So who am I to go tell anyone else? I was a part of it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So can you just for context, can you give an example? Like when you say he pulled you into things, for example, like what were the kinds of things he pulled you into where you would have felt a certain responsibility to them yourself?
Yeah. So I think a good example of that would be one time we had a weekend trip planned together, and he had told me that he wanted to have a drink as almost an experiment to see if he could have a casual drink without going to get high and falling back into those things.
Right.
And I had said no, but he ended up planning this whole thing for me where he was like, okay, but let's keep our plans. I respect that you said no, but let's keep the weekend as is. And he booked me an appointment, a nail appointment, which was one of my favorite things to do. Go get my nails done. There was like this other plan involved. He had set up several things that I really like to do. He said, well, I'm going to take you here to do this before we go on our trip, and then we'll head out. And he dropped me off in the nail salon, and while I was there, he told me he was going to go pick up food, and he went to buy drugs instead.
Wow.
Just happened to run into someone, right? It's not that easy. And so he came back with drugs to my car. And at that point, I felt obligated to let everything unfold, what was going to unfold.
Right.
And in that moment, when you see that in front of you and you're in that moment and you're shocked, you're not strong enough to say, get out of my car.
Right.
I'm not going to enable you. It would just be put on me sometimes.
Right.
There were other times then when it became more normalized and I started almost allowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that increased my feelings of, did I try to set him up for failure? Did I,
enable?
I would have, So, but that was one of the pivotal times where he took me to a nail appointment. He went and got drugs, came back, and now here I am. You don't want to drop them off and let them go because you know what it feels like to wonder where they are for 4 days and be so afraid for them.
Yeah.
So it puts you in that place of like, maybe I am enabling them. Maybe this is all my fault.
Yeah.
Right.
That was one example. But
yeah.
I'd imagine you try very hard not to rock the boat either.
Oh,
you
God,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So
when
you
it's
just
bad,
kinda
it's
like,
bad.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I felt responsible for his life. That was one of the things that kept me in the relationship because I was afraid if we broke it off, he would go get high and maybe he would overdose, obviously relapse. And that kept me a lot of times. But there was all that, everything surrounding the relationship was about power and control. So it wasn't just the addiction that was the issue, but that was a big part of it. You feel responsible for their life. And a lot of women deal with it where their abuser's threatening, if you leave me, I will
do
hurt myself.
Yeah.
And so they feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've talked before about like how they're jealous and then they start to isolate you. Can you talk about the isolation phase and how that started in your relationship, how he started pulling you away from like friends and family and things? And like, do you have any specific memories of when that started where you thought, that was weird, but he might be right? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the important things is they don't always directly say to you, you can't go see your family or you can't wear that or you can't go see that friend. They just make those things very difficult until you decide not to do them on your own. And so that they can turn to you and say, I never said you couldn't.
Yeah.
Stop acting like I'm a monster.
Yeah.
Stop overreacting. Stop acting like I'm some piece of whatever.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, you're making me act this way because you don't have confidence in me or you don't have trust in me.
Yeah.
And that's like how it starts. But I remember one time that was specifically painful for me was we actually had just arrived at our honeymoon and there had been a lot of things going on before we got married. But this time in particular was very painful. He had just given me the silent treatment the whole way to our destination.
Oh my God.
Because he felt that I wasn't defending him enough against my family. Like I wasn't standing up for him enough.
All right.
There was this whole drama surrounding everything and he felt like I wasn't defending him enough. And so when we landed at our destination, he told me he didn't want me texting them the whole trip. He wanted to have a no phone trip. So they make it make sense. Like he told me it was for the purpose of being fully present. So he wanted me to be present on our honeymoon, which meant no phones.
Right.
He told me, I don't want you texting your parents, your grandfather, like the most bizarre things.
Right.
Of course I did. And when I kind of came back and said, I don't really like that idea, I remember he stayed mad at me for the next hour and he shoved me in the airport. And I knew it was out of anger. Like I knew he shoved me on purpose, but he said it was to make me walk faster. So they make it make sense. They're like, there's a reason for there's a reason for everything.
Everything.
With abusers, there's a reason for everything. I pushed you to make you walk faster.
Yeah.
I don't want you texting your family to be fully present. He said, I want you to get used to leaving your family and growing closer to me. And that right there, I was like.
What's weird to me about that situation is that I feel like subconsciously, I mean, or at that point, you knew something was seriously wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you not known that, like, it's a fairly romantic gesture from a normal situation, right? To say, you know,
a healthy person.
Right. Let's be present together. Let's both shut our phones off.
Yeah.
It's our honeymoon. Let's have fun.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was so, like, it became such a toxic thing and that you caught onto it.
Because it's the intention, right?
Yeah. It's the intention behind it.
And that's why it's so deceiving. Because like she said, you can justify things like that. Right. When someone you love says on your honeymoon, I really just wanted to be us. I want us to be present. Yeah. That's a justifiable thing. Yeah. You can look at that and go, that makes sense. That's reasonable. But it's the intention of, I want to cut her off from her family because I don't like the way they see me. And so I'm going to tell her I just want her to be present with me. That's where it's like so twisted. Because there's always a meaning behind everything they do. There's always something they're trying to get out of every single thing they request that isn't healthy. That is to, you know, either put you in your place in their eyes, or to scare you so that you don't, you know, respond to things, or to put you in the box they need you to be in so they can continue the abuse. There's always an ulterior motive for every single thing that seems like a healthy gesture.
Yeah, they dress it up. I mean, it appears they dress it up.
And I think that's what people miss a lot of times. To the person who's in it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it fully makes sense.
It makes sense.
People don't realize how much the victim or the survivor believes it's their fault.
Yeah.
Like, they really believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that belief is so deep. And so it doesn't just, you cannot just pull them out. Like I always tell people, you cannot make them leave.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing. You want to just pull them out and say, wake up. Can't you see this right in front of your face? Like how they're treating you. But you cannot make them.
That's right.
They will push you out. That's what I did. I was like, it didn't matter how close we were prior to the abusive relationship. It didn't matter if I'd known you my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
If you were my parent, family member, nothing. I was going to choose what I needed to survive and to stay well almost. But the same thing that you think you need to stay, you know, to stay well is the thing that's killing you.
Yeah.
You think you need the trauma bond to stay happy. You're in those highs and lows.
It's the only happiness you feel, but it's also the thing that's causing you to be sick.
Exactly.
Mentally and emotionally.
Just to give you perspective, I'm a recovering addict.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I hear things like that, to me, it sounds like an addiction kind of.
It is.
That's for me with addiction. And the only way that I can relate to something like that feeling is that you just don't know what you are without it.
Yeah.
Right? Like
exactly.
you're
you
terrified.
know it's not good for you.
Yeah. And you continue to do it and you're terrified about what you'll be without it. Like,
Yeah.
who will you be? Like, you don't have
Yeah.
any identity outside of it.
Yeah.
And you're trapped. And you're just like, you fear.
Yeah.
Will you be able to function the same? Will you be the same? Like, all these things, all these thoughts just keep you trapped into the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And actually, after my ex got arrested from our house on a few domestic violence charges, I had left the state. I had driven back to my home state right away. From the moment I got in the car and started driving, I felt like I was being pulled back the whole time. And I immediately went into the lying again. I started making phone calls, trying to plant seeds in people like, hey, just so you know, it wasn't that bad. Just so you know, I did this or that to push him to that. So this is just a big misunderstanding. This is going to blow over and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
That terrified me because I could feel that I was going back into the lying.
Right.
And I was like, damn, like I'm really going into this phase again where I'm going to go back. I resolved to go back again after that. I even wrote him a letter and said, no, we're going to make this work. Like, this was all my fault.
Yep.
You can't think for yourself anymore.
That's right. That's so typical for victims too, to get to a place where after you've had the time to sit and think about things, you're looking at a whole picture, right? And you're emphasizing the things you did wrong in your mind, right? Which justifies their behavior in your mind. So then you're like, I have to apologize. Yeah. I need to be the one to apologize. You are convinced now that you were the one that was in the wrong, right?
Exactly. And so I went right back into that lying phase.
Yep.
And I think once there was a no contact order put in place from the state. So I had the option to hold to that restraining order and not talk to him, but I gave right into it. He started with, he started calling me right away off the hook, and you fall in. It's very hard to resist that. And so I started talking to him again regularly. And I think what really scared me was getting back in that rhythm with him. Like, okay, I'm really in this. Like, I'm really going back. And I think I realized, like, if I actually go back again for the millionth time, like, I'm really going to be stuck this time.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think I would get out again. That shook me, and that made me realize, like, now might be my chance to just
get away for good.
Yeah. So.
And the truth is, it was the best decision you ever made in your life, because who knows how much worse the abuse would get, because it always gets worse.
Yeah.
It always does.
And during that altercation that night, he had grabbed me by the throat several times. That's what really scared me.
Yeah.
What made me run to our neighbor's house was he punched the wall next to my head. And that made me run. But during that time frame, I learned that when an abuser puts their hands on your neck, your chances of them taking it further are astronomical.
The chances of them murdering you significantly increase.
Murdering, yes. It's the chances of killing you that go up.
Yeah.
So that one type of physical abuse in particular.
That in particular, they have noticed after like studies that once a man's hands have been wrapped around your neck, something in him that is triggers that he is very likely, his chances of killing you go up significantly. Wow. That was for me too. That was when I left mine. Was when he strangled me. I knew if I don't get out of here, and I didn't know the statistics. This was like years and years and years ago.
Yeah,
I knew this man will kill me. I knew, I could see it in his eyes. In that moment, I could see it in his eyes that he would kill me. He would kill me, and I had no other choice. Like it was, and I still loved him. Yeah. I still justified his behavior. I still didn't even want to leave him, but I knew I had to save my life.
Yeah,
you know.
Exactly. And a lot of times with abusers, there's a switch that happens in them. Their eyes change, their demeanor changes, and it's very scary. Yep. If you've been in a moment with them where you see that switch in them, you know what that's like.
Yep.
And that is what I was dealing with. And so just shocked me, like, I'm really going to go back, and I want to go back still.
Yeah.
But I had to make the choice to do it while I still felt guilty. Like, as in leaving him, I had to do it while I still felt unsure, while I still felt scared, while I still felt responsible for his life.
Yeah.
I had to make a lot of those decisions when I still felt like I was betraying him.
You still didn't necessarily want to, but you had to choose you.
Yeah.
You had to choose you and save your life instead of trying to consistently change and save his.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, yeah.
How long has it been?
Well, almost 2 years.
It's when you reflect back.
It's like a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Still pretty fresh.
Yeah. When you reflect back, when you think about him, could you ever find yourself with the thought of
once you're out of it,
I don't know how deeply rooted it obviously.
Leaving is the hardest part.
Right.
Yeah. So it's the hardest part.
Kind of like, does that person still have a capability to suck you back in?
Once a woman has left an abuser, once she's truly left, like put it in her mind that I'm gone, they're very likely to go back. Okay. Very unlikely to go back is what I should say. Right. It's when you're still in that kind of back and forth with them where you're still not sure, like you want to be there, you don't want to be there. That's when it's like the risk is higher to stay or go back. But once you've truly detached.
Yeah. But no, that's a good question. The answer is a hard no.
Well, good for you.
But I want that to be encouraging to people, because there's not this perfect timeline for healing. There's not this mark where you're going to be like, okay, I'm officially healed.
Right. Yeah.
But those feelings fade. Yeah. They wear off. I don't care how obsessed you are with someone, how obsessed you are with them, the whole relationship.
That's right.
How convinced you are that obsession will never fade. It will.
Yep.
It might take some time, but those feelings will fade. The feelings of feeling guilty for leaving them, feeling like you abandoned the poor version of them, you know, you feel bad for them. The feelings that you betrayed them or that it was your fault, those fade.
They do.
There's no perfect timeline, but No, I don't feel any of those anymore.
No.
Okay.
And the more those feelings fade, the more you see the truth of who they were, as opposed to who you thought they were when you were in it.
Yeah.
I would
Absolutely.
imagine it's like having blinders taken off.
It is.
Once you finally come out of the fog.
It truly is.
And towards the very end, you know, when you're getting to that point where you're like, okay, I think I want to try to get out, but you're not quite ready. You really start to hate them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you start to hate them, but you're still not ready to leave. And then, because as the cycle of abuse gets tighter and tighter, it's almost like the good times start to become worse than the bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the bad times, at least for me, I felt like that was the only time I was in my reality where I was like, okay, I'm seeing this correctly. Like he's crazy. I'm seeing this correctly. I am not the crazy one. But then when they take you back through that cycle where they're all of a sudden good again and they're apologizing and they're crying and like, give me another chance. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. With your social media, what is the one thing that you want people to get from your page? What is the message that you want to come from your page?
Yeah. So I think what I want people to really take from my page is that even if you're still convinced it's your fault, or if you even if you still believe that, it's still not your fault.
Yeah.
You didn't cause it. You can't change it. There's nothing you can do. They are the way they are, and you didn't do anything to cause it. And like, I also want to show that there is that addictive cycle to it where you don't want to be mistreated,
Right.
but they bring you to those highs and lows. They're throwing you around through that. And the cycle of abuse is incredibly strong. There's a reason why it takes an average of 7 times to leave for good. It's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And, you know, also know one thing that helped me is know what to expect when you're leaving.
Yeah.
You can't know exactly what's going to happen, but knowing that you might feel guilty, you might feel those feelings of, okay, am I betraying them? Maybe they're gonna come on full force and try to stalk you and do those things. Knowing what to expect can help you a lot. So I try to show what's really going on that causes us to stay again, and what can you expect to say, okay, I'm feeling this feeling, this is really hard, but maybe I can push through this.
Yeah.
And maybe this won't last forever.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't. So
That's so good.
yeah, I think
It's a great message.
So good.
the last thing I want to say is if you are in a situation, like call the domestic violence hotline. I want people to know that they're available. They're not going to force you to do anything.
Okay.
You can call them, but at least to talk.
Yeah.
Even if your abuser's showing signs of stalking, it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're there to help. But really, I found that the only way to get out was to pretty much drop everything and run.
Yeah.
You can't leave any opening for them to be in your ear. One of the most dangerous things is having that final talk with your abuser. A lot of times stuff happens, like it can be very dangerous. The most dangerous time is when you're leaving.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the most dangerous thing can be their words, because their words are often what pull us back.
Yeah.
And they keep us hooked on hope. And that's how we fall back into it a lot of times. So
That's right.
sometimes you just have to get all the resources you can, drop everything,
And
Get
run.
out.
no explanation. Like,
Yeah.
I don't
And
see
that's
any other
hard to
way.
do,
I
but
don't
it's
s-
necessary.
Yeah. So,
Well, thank you for sharing that story. It's
Yeah.
very close and personal, so I appreciate you.
yeah,
Sure, you'll help a lot of women.
Yeah,
hearing
she
it.
will.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Already is.
I got to check out your page, by the way. I've checked out your page, but I obviously haven't had much time to go through it, but I'd love
Right.
to hear more of your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm learning more and more now as from knowing Ashley and some of the guests. It's unbelievable. I think I just have a hard time wrapping my head around it sometimes because I just can't imagine getting to that place. So it's very difficult for me to imagine what gets somebody there where they would raise a hand to a woman.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's upbringing, right? You said, I know it's probably something that's built into them. But yeah, fuck them all. Sorry. That's just, huh? Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
And
Most men do.
seriously,
know?
I don't give a fuck how anybody feels about me saying it. Go fuck yourself. Sorry, excuse my language. There's certain things that are like ingrained in my every being and raising your hand to a woman is not one of them. So when I hear about it, it's pretty.
We struggle to stay angry. Like,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest things is we struggle to stay angry when we're in it.
Yeah.
We often forgive them because they're coming forward and
Right.
I'm so sorry. Can we just get back to us? And we struggle to stay angry. And so anger is fine.
It is fine.
Yeah.
It's more than fine.
As always, guys, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to continue to give us feedback. As always, you know we enjoy it. We love it. Also, be sure to check out this lovely lady, Grace Stuart. You can check out her IG at Grace Stuart 26. That's Grace Stuart 26. For all you ladies out there who need advice and domestic violence support, definitely check out her podcast. You can check it out on Spotify at Why She Stayed. Check our IG out at notfornothing.podcast. Check out our YouTube at Not For Nothing Podcast, one word. And you can see all our episodes and short clip content anytime you like. Also, I've just kind of been thinking, why don't you guys start sending in topics that you want to hear us talk about? I would absolutely love to hear what the viewers want to hear us talk about. Give us a little bit more of an assortment over here. Feel free to DM us. Let us know anytime. Grace, thank you for joining us. We love having you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.